This is actually kind of a problem that you're not here because you were supposed to eat a spoonful of cinnamon
On the
on the
podcast.
podcast today.
Oh yeah. Our
No,
new rule for podcast
Yeah.
guests.
that's impossible.
It's well, we were going to find
Well,
out.
Hold on, I'm looking in the kitchen here. I'm at Tutor Spree's office. Oh, wait a minute. Oh my God.
They got a lot of cinnamon at Tutor Spree.
You will not believe what I just found.
He's got.
Oh,
I
there-
can confirm via Skype video he
Ground
has
cinnamon.
cinnamon.
Is there a spoonful though?
There's not a lot in here.
That
but
looks
there's
like enough.
We-
Just throw it all back.
We can't do
Well, wait until we're ready.
an audio podcast
No, we're
where
ready.
he eats cinnamon. There's like a radio show about dancing.
You're listening to Stack Overflow Podcast, episode number 43 with special guest star Alexis Daniel from Reddit and Jay Hanlon,
Hello.
David Fulgen,
Yo,
and I'm Joel. Also, breadpig.com, Alexis, and Tutor Spree. What's Tutor Spree? Why are you there?
Oh, Tutor Spree is one of my portfolio companies, and that's where my last meeting was, and it
Portfolio.
went over, which is why I'm not in y'all's lovely offices downtown.
Okay, our offices are better, but that's okay.
It's okay. It's a very cool marketplace for tutoring. So if your kids need to get their learn on, or you need to get your learn on something, you can go find a cool tutor anywhere nearby.
Can I volunteer to be a
help you
tutor for
whatever.
14-year-olds?
Get better at Mandarin or Rails.
Rails, did you say? Mandarin on Rails?
Mandarin or Rails. The Mandarin on Rails is a little side project of mine. DHH thought he had everything in that department, but no. Been working on something special.
why don't you introduce Alexis?
Alexis is the co-founder of Reddit, and that's how he got sort of famous. He's also considered sort of a co-founder of HipMonk, travel site.
So, not technically a founder.
Not technically a founder. I know.
I joined a week before launch, but I ran the marketing, the PR, but I'm not a co-founder.
That's right. He's an investor, probably. And invest in a lot of other little kind of startups through
Das Kapital.
Das
Yeah.
Kapital. There you go. I'm not reading anything. I'm just doing this all by memory.
Dude,
He's a strong
awesome.
advocate against SOPA and PIPA, and he knows how to dress
Thanks to you, Joel.
when doing that advocating.
Did Joel tell you to wear the red tie? Was that Joel's doing?
Absolutely. Are you kidding? I've been trying. I cannot give him enough props for that.
No.
Is that true?
He even got a shout out in the New Yorker. Well, the tie got a shout out in the New Yorker, but that was all Joel.
This is funny because I was looking through some Alexis stuff over the last couple of days. I had it was mostly stuff I'd seen before, but I had an active thought of, wow, he's got like a bold red tie on. Was that really a discussion you guys had?
Alexis, did we give you? I gave somebody like a sheet of paper with instructions for how to
That was
dress.
me. Joel taught me how to dress.
And
on a
and
sheet
who
of
else?
paper.
Who else was there? I can't remember. There was somebody that was helping me.
Michael was definitely there. He
You
was
mean
also
Michael?
helpful.
Really?
We should write that up and give it to all new
Certain things
developer
like
employees.
silk ties,
Male
worsted wool
fashion
suits.
advice. It was all
Yeah.
that. It was like the entire subreddit was right there, except it was Joel on a sheet of paper, and
You should write that
I
up.
took a photo of it so I wouldn't have to save the paper, and I occasionally still refer to it.
When I saw that there was a description of you wearing a red tie in the New Yorker magazine, I almost died. I had to like call up all my relatives. I'm like,
Yes,
it's New Yorker
that was
magazine.
all
See how
you.
it says red
Yeah,
tie?
because I had done a thing on
Awesome.
MSNBC the day or two before,
Yeah.
and I wore a
A yellowed.
blue and yellow tie,
Yeah, mostly
and
yellow.
and Joel was like, "Got to get rid of that tie. No, you're gonna have to wear a red tie the next time I see you doing any kind of public appearance in a suit." And borrowed a tie from my dad, that red tie, and there it is. That was also, it was the one, like a second of me was featured in that Google Zeitgeist video, that commercial for the New Year's, and it's
Oh, yeah.
it's a red tie,
yeah, I
right
saw
there,
that too.
front and center. You should just say Joel Spolsky on it.
This discussion may be the highlight of this podcast.
So if you'd like a Joel Spolsky clothing critique, you can just send Joel your picture in an outfit, and he'll send back what you're doing wrong.
No. Well, let's make it part of the podcast. So when you write in with a
That
question,
should be a segment in every episode.
write
I
in
love
with
it.
a question, attach a picture of yourself, and Joel will critique your clothes.
Alexis, I know that these guys have an agenda, but I wanted to ask you something. Can we talk about subreddits momentarily?
Sure, I think
'Cause
that's
you
on the
will
menu,
remember
or on
subreddits.
the agenda,
Yes.
along with this cinnamon.
Yeah, you still hasn't eaten the tablespoon of cinnamon. I can see here.
I bet there's an eating cinnamon subreddit. There's that many of them.
Probably. Yeah, I know what happens when you eat cinnamon. This is not going to end well, certainly for the audio portion of this broadcast.
It's on
We should
your
probably
nose,
just- yeah.
and maybe your ears.
People just can't believe it. It's sort of like biting down on an aluminum foil. Like it's a really, really bad thing, and people just don't realize how bad how bad could it be to bite down on aluminum foil?
Oh, it's terrible.
Try to get the YouTubers to do that now.
Yeah, I experimented a lot as a kid.
So subreddits.
What now? Okay,
This came up when we did a preliminary call with Alexis, and I was watching the interview that you did with Leo Laporte and how do you say his name?
Yeah.
Leo
Okay.
Laporte. Yeah.
And you just mentioned sort of something in passing about how way back in the day for Reddit, you had a debate about whether you should use tags or subreddits, and you were actually on the tag side, and you lost that debate. And then,
So if it was tags, it could be multiply tagged. It could be in several Reddits at the same
Yeah.
time.
Here was the thinking. Like,
So, but everything would be in like WTF and funny.
probably.
Yeah.
My ingenious air quote plan for that was, upon submission, the submitter would be able to choose maybe 3 tags to identify this thing. And it would be a way to really quickly goose all the different verticals. Because when we launched Reddit, it was just one front page. And like a month in, Steve and I realized like we got to have some kind of categorization.
Yeah.
I really wanted tags. It was kind of in vogue with Delicious and Flickr. And Steve insisted on creating multiple subreddits. And it was going to take longer. See, I knew, so he's the engineer, I was the non-technical. And we decided that for any argument where we had a stalemate, we would eventually just defer to the person who had the expertise. So if it was a non-technical decision, eventually, if we couldn't make up our minds, it would be me. And if it was technical, Steve. And from my point of view, I thought about how long it would take to generate all these new communities. And really, just building one was a fight. Trying to build the first 10 or 20 or 50 was going to take a while. And I was going to be the one to have to do it. Steve, the engineer, realized that although it would take longer, it would provide for a better product. Because you know what? If we see one link about any generic news item, how I interpret it is going to be different from how you interpret it, which is going to be different from how someone else interprets it. And if you actually have that one link submitted distinctly to these different subreddits, you would have these distinct different discussions and communities built around those things that you just couldn't do with the tagging system. Because you would look at, imagine the submission page, you'd have like one comments page with all the different tags. And so you get people who are coming at an article from one perspective, talking to others who are talking from another. And the Reddit commenting system works really well because it allows for that particular community to vote the way it wants to and what they think is interesting or funny or what have you. And it would have broken down. So fortunately, Steve had the foresight to be so adamant about it needing to be subreddits. And maybe another month later, we were talking to Joel, Reddit Trivia, at a dinner, at one of the Y Combinator dinners. He was a guest. And he asked for a Joel subreddit because people were submitting him links all the time that he didn't have time to read. And he just wanted to tell them to go submit it to this subreddit. So we made him one. I drew a little Joel Reddit alien. Joel.reddit, I think, still exists. I don't want to look it up in the browser and risk diluting bandwidth and all because I've got like 60 tabs open in Chrome.
They would have
but
it's still there. I still got that picture.
Joel.reddit was the first subreddit that we made, and that was because of Joel.
first subreddit.
Of course, nobody's submitted anything for 5 months.
Yeah, I should
Because
get
the right way to send you a
You're
link
just
now is
sending
to-
them all to Stack now. It's fine. I'm not going to take it personally.
No, you just tweet it, Joel. He ignores your tweet.
There are six users of the Joel subreddit, but it's the oldest subreddit, right?
Yeah, I think it must predate programming, which was the first.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
First one we created. I think after that.
No, you had something for. Didn't you have a Condé Nast pink? Something.
Oh, that was later. Yes, that was lipstick.
Lipstick. Yeah.
Yeah, celebrity gossip.
Not so popular.
So I thought this was interesting because we, it's a couple years in now, but we faced a similar choice, right? Do we just try to put all these things on one site? We have tags, but do we try to put all these communities into one site and just segregate them somehow with tags or something? Or do we make separate sites for each kind of community? And obviously we came down on the side of making separate sites for each community for, it sounds like some similar reasons. Every community is a little bit different, has their own attitudes and perspectives.
What feels like a difference, I think we both agreed that you needed a community of people who really care about that topic, right? The challenge with, whoopee responses, or what are they called? Yahoo Answers, is you got someone asking a very legitimate question about how to fix their carburetor of a Mitsubishi Lancer, and the next question is a girl asking if anyone's worn the same dress to prom in previous years. And the odds that they're going to help each other by sourcing answers is small, right? So the separation made sense because you have people who are more likely to care about the questions flying in. One perception I have of a difference, and some of this may or may not be right, Alexis, is on our sites, I think people come in when we get them through the individual sites, and it's actually almost hard for them to discover that there is a broad connection to these other sites. We've created such kind of clearly defined separate communities that the network is barely apparent, I think, to users for a meaningful period of time. My sense on Reddit is a lot of people come in through the centralized front door. They're looking at kind of the Reddit homepage to discover Reddit, and only perhaps meaningfully later, after they've been kind of playing and perusing and amusing themselves on Reddit, do they discover and dig into subreddits. So it seems like a different acquisition, but is that even accurate? That's just my outsider's guess.
Yes, no, that is accurate. In fact, historically, Reddit has never gotten a lot of traffic from things like search engines. More than half of our traffic, I think significantly more, but I feel comfortable saying definitely more than 50% comes from, reddit.com, people just hitting the front page as this destination. And it's actually something I'd like to change. It's one of the things that we've been working to solve or to fix, because we have a significant number of our users who don't even know that there's a subreddit for their favorite sports team, who don't even know that there's a subreddit for their hometown, who don't even know there's a subreddit for their favorite hobby. And so we don't do as good of a job as we could onboarding users. And I bring up Twitter as a comparison just because, Twitter is a platform where people who are fans of Nicki Minaj could go to hang out with her community of followers. And at the same time, be using it to look at fans of The Economist's feed. And I'm sure actually I'm a fan of both, so I guess that Venn diagram does overlap sometimes. But, subscribing to subreddits ought to be similar to subscribing to Twitter accounts.
Yeah.
And that's not something we make obvious right now for new users, and it's something that we really need to work on.
You could just have, once you click through on something, I guess you can't always, not always a place to put that. But a part of it is like you got to give people a subscribe button where it's like, hey, you got here because you just clicked on something from the WTF subreddit.
Yeah.
If you like that.
I think it's Reddit has not changed a lot aesthetically since 2005, and we are in a lot of ways, I think, cursed by our own inexperience, and you could even argue maybe inability with design. I mean, Steve and I all we knew first out of college was like, we'll just make it simple. We'll err on the side of simplicity and a Spartan design, and just not get in the way of our users. And it's helped, but it kind of puts us in a tricky place when we want to draw people's attention to new things and change the process. Like Alien Blue, which is not made by Reddit, but made by this awesome Australian fellow, is the best iOS app out there. And he's done a very good job with the sort of onboarding experience. When you open that app up for the first time, you're greeted on the left rail with a bunch of very, very sort of popular subreddits. And the subscribe and unsubscribe flow is much more obvious than it is from the Reddit web client. But it's something we need to figure out without really making user experience suck, which is always the goal. Like, don't make that suck.
Don't make it worse.
How today, this is a sort of tangential, but how today do you figure out what subreddit you do belong in when you start at the top? Like let's say I wanted to go on Reddit and I want to post awesome podcast featuring Alexis, right? Went live today. I've played around enough to know that I'd have a hard time having any clue what the right subreddit to post that is. The discoverability is
there isn't a right subreddit, right? They're just individual communities.
Just post it to all of them.
Well,
they'll either vote it up or they won't.
With me is a tricky one because one of the things I think we also really did right was that we didn't develop too much of a cult of personality, unlike say Dig, around our founders. And so Steve and I were very present on the site, and people knew us because they would complain to us with feedback, and we would try to be helpful. But content that generally just features us is not in any way guaranteed to succeed, which is a good sign. So I would recommend maybe submitting it to there's got to be a podcasting community. Our podcasts or podcasting has to be there. If our Joel, of course, were still up and running, that would be a contender.
We're bringing
and
it
depending
back
on what
right
we
now.
talked about, maybe there's our startups or I mean, if we started to do a deep dive into Lisp, you could submit it to our Lisp, but that's probably not going to happen.
Actually, we added that to the agenda after we talked to you.
Damn it. I thought I'd escape those parens once and for all. I tried to learn Lisp for about 2 days. It was bad.
Well, that's your mistake. You can't learn in anything less than 2 years. So.
I was a quitter. I would.
Of course, if you'd done that by the time you finished learning it, it would already have been too late because the site would have been changed to Python.
Yeah, sad but true.
So one just thought on sort of the simple layout, and and it's difficult to change things now, but just don't forget the cautionary tale that is Craigslist, where if you're just unwilling to change, the whole model collapses around you. It just ceases to function.
Yeah, that's a very good cautionary tale. Trust me, I'm not involved full time at Reddit, but I am on the board and I'm still on the mailing list, and I bring this up routinely, and we've got a lot of smart, awesome people there. And I know Yishan, who's our CEO now, knows that this is a priority. And yeah, I think we're going to make the right choices. Hopefully not piss off too many people.
I'm being told Craigslist is still around and doing wonderfully. I perhaps misunderstood.
No, here's the thing. Craigslist is the one that I like. When I look at Airbnb, I'm imagining them drinking the milkshake of the entire Craigslist, what is it, rental section. I mean, I see so many startups as being these more efficient marketplaces for so many of the sections of Craigslist. And they're still doing very well. But I don't think there are many people who are like, yes, this is the place where I want to sell my bicycle.
Airbnb will now forever have an awesome mustache when I envision them personified.
Excellent. Not the sinister kind.
So what are you up to lately? You've got a new book coming out. You got like a big formal, real...
Yes. Well, I'm very excited because I finally just submitted it. So the final edits are in. It's called Without Their Permission, and it'll be out in the fall. And the there in that is gatekeepers, is anyone who historically
owns a TV network,
served as a middleman or a barrier or some kind of gatekeeper between some talented person with a good idea and the rest of the world. And so it's some of my own startup stories. It's philanthropists using platforms like Donors Choose. It's artists using platforms like Kickstarter. It's activists using all those wonderful social media things in fights against stupid bills like SOAP and PIPA that really, really have convinced me, especially in the last few years, of just how transformative this all has become. Because I can look a college student straight in the eyes and tell her, like, if you want to start the next Instagram, you could go back to your dorm room right now and get started on it.
Also, you should go back in time.
It's pretty empowering.
Backwards in time, and then start Instagram, because then you're going to make $1 billion.
Right. Yeah. Don't start it.
So don't do it now. Yeah.
Is it really more? Would you say it's more like Twilight or The Hunger Games? If I'm to figure out when I should read it.
Oh, geez. It's got more vampire sex than Twilight.
Done.
What?
I'm sorry. I just pre-ordered. We're good.
There's no vampire sex in Twilight.
Wait, there isn't?
Spoiler alert.
How does David know this?
Oh, my wife is a huge Twilight fan.
I wish it had the awesome heroine of Hunger Games, but I did not.
Heroine?
Well, there are a few. Not quite Hunger Games
This is
level.
rated G, man.
Yeah.
This will be the podcast where we talk about heroin and vampire sex. That's the
heroine, like female hero.
Yeah. We got it. So the book you said in the fall sometime.
Yes, I don't know when. They haven't told me.
Available at bookstores near you.
Hold on. Whose permission do you need to get this book out?
There is the obvious irony because I am technically a publisher. I know. Well,
you didn't self-publish?
It's a lot easier to publish like XKCD's book and Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal's book and Ryan North's book because they have this established fan base that for years has been enjoying their content that they've freely given away.
That's true.
And
actually.
I do not have such a fan base who's been lovingly enjoying the content I've been freely giving away.
You do have a fan base. You just don't have like a blog that you can go promote this thing on.
Yeah, there isn't that obvious. And I can't just put it number one on the front page of Reddit.
Wait, of course you can.
We don't work like that. I mean, I could buy ads. I'll probably buy ads. But
Sweet.
So yeah, that is coming out this fall. And in the meantime, it's, continuing to help out startups that I've invested in and just continue to hopefully keep New York rocking as a tech hub and make sure that Washington doesn't screw it all up.
What's the next thing that Washington's going to do? Is this something that should be on our agenda, something that our ears should be prickling about? Because every once in a while, like remember when Chuck Schumer was like, please tell me before you push that button.
The button, yes.
Literally what he said, the senator from New York said, because it turns out that you guys had that internet button or Reddit or whatever you call it. So just call the senator's office before you push that button and get the whole internet all angry at us.
I want to disabuse him of this notion that there's some magical Reddit button that gets the entire internet upset.
No, you don't want. You want him to think that you have that button.
We definitely want to keep him thinking about that button.
Yes.
I have offered to show it to him at times. You want to see the button?
Oh, this is taking a strange turn.
Well, you can't see it. You can't. No, you got to. Let's make a deal here. Can't just give it away. Everyone's been talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the TPP, which is its street name.
Yeah.
But I really like, right? Got some TPP. I really like thinking about this more proactively. And then actually, I'm on the right podcast here because Joel had a really great Google Plus post. Do you guys remember Google Plus?
Yeah, I had one post.
You had a really great post on the matter.
I did.
About being proactive.
I said we should, instead of sitting around and trying to shut down stupid things that they try to do to us, that we should just try to shut them down in the first place.
Yes.
We should proactively go out there and just fight for 2 years of copyright. Plenty of time. Keep your copyright for 2 years.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I think
And
between
let them fight us back to 15 years.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
my
there
theory.
is, whether it's software patents, which seem like
0.
pretty low hanging fruit. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I've had enough promising conversations with politicians who have said, okay, I think I'm understanding why this is stupid and how the only people who are taking advantage of this are basically extorting small companies or large companies who are hoarding and stifling innovation. Like either way, it's lose-lose.
Yeah.
And they certainly, I think it's important to frame this as like, this is not a war against patents. This is against software patents, which are unique and uniquely stupid.
And also business method patents, basically all kinds of abstract patents are worth
Well, so, and it's like Schumer was a good example because he understood why business method patents were dumb.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so this is even dumber. All right, great. Software patents. Let's sign me up for getting rid of those. But
let's talk about that for a second, though. So I think it's not obvious to people what makes that such a hard line. So what's the place where all of a sudden you go, you know what, the reason that any patent that relates to the way software, because the software increasingly sort of represents many of the services and builds the machines that builds the tools.
So why shouldn't it be patented?
So what's the line, right? Assuming we believe that devices should be patented, that the thing that your Yankee apple peeler, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense to be patented and locked in. Why wouldn't we think a completely revolutionary type of software should be?
Because software patents are abstract in the sense that they don't actually say you cannot make this exact machine. They tend to say you can't make a thing that's kind of bright and then kind of dim and then kind of upside down, and then which means that they tend to cover a lot more territory than you want them to, while simultaneously not covering any territory, if that makes sense.
I'd almost, because I don't really disagree.
That was a bad description.
Well, I think the problem is it's almost that what's happened so far is
I got a better description. Okay. It's like, imagine that airplanes were just being invented and you were an airline company and you were trying to organize flights from New York to Los Angeles because airplanes had just been invented and this was this amazing thing that was going to help everybody. And your plane took off from New York and flew over Farmer John's land, and he sued you, saying you trespassed on his land even though you were 30,000 feet above it. His property line goes all the way up to the outer ozone layer, let's say, although probably infinitely according to old law. And so you then went and signed a deal with Farmer John to pass over his land, and then discovered that there were 9,436,252 other farmers that owned little tiny plots of land between New York and Los Angeles, and you had to somehow bribe them all to own the legal right to fly over all that land. And that's what happens with software patents. When we write a computer program, a typical large software application that people have been working on for several years has got 1 million lines of code, and every 3 lines is violating somebody's stupid patent that never should have been granted because it's obvious.
But I think that, so I agree with all that. I think that the answer may be that we don't actually fundamentally think software patents as a concept or a bad idea, but simply that because software is sort of at the cutting edge, in the wrong, but at the forefront of progress, that we're not likely to ever have a system. What we're really saying is the people who approve patents aren't capable of understanding which software patents are either obvious or too broad.
Yeah.
And so it's almost, we're saying it's a field where the ability to apply patents in the way they were intended will consistently fail because they just don't get it.
Yeah, I have not seen a single non-obvious software patent ever. They are actually all obvious, or they're all the kind of things that people would invent anyway. And then there's all kinds of broken things about the patents that are issued. In particular, the patent law was intended to say, if you have an invention and the invention is a thing that pops balloons, you can't just patent popping balloons. What you're patenting is, let's say like a little needle attached to a piece of the stick that you use to whack the balloon and pop it. That's the patent shows a little drawing with a needle attached to a stick, and it shows how you would use it to whack the balloon and pop the balloon. But if somebody
Have
else...
you already patented this? Because you're just closing it off a lot.
I'm going to write this down.
This is a great idea.
Go get it. But the thing is, in a software patent, you wouldn't patent the stick with the little needle. You would just say popping balloons, and they would grant it. And then anybody that came up with any system for popping balloons, you would then say, well, I think I have a patent on that popping balloons concept. And part of the problem is that these patents are getting issued just for the very act of doing something without even specifying a machine that can do it.
But again, I'd say that's a very strong argument for the fact that software patents should be held to the same level of specificity as other patents.
Well, if
Not
they did, they would all dissolve. There would be 15 patents instead of 50
No, I agree.
million.
We can all, and there's all these classic examples of one click, right? That you sort of have these two things that you just combine two very obvious things that already exist.
That was bad. That one was one click is one of the only patents I'm willing to defend.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Because it is not obvious. Because it was extraordinarily not obvious.
Let's play
at the
that
time.
game. Let's play. I'm going to switch sides now.
Yeah.
One Click lived in a world where basically there was a shopping cart that existed that you put stuff into, including up to only one thing, one or more items.
Yep.
And then after that,
that was another patent, by the way, which is a bad patent.
After that, you put a bunch of information about yourself, where I live and how I will pay you, etc. And you could save all that information already.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Amazon came up with this, and Amazon's like my favorite company. I don't think I own anything that didn't come from Amazon. But you would then press one button, and Amazon said, "We have come up with the most ingenious, unfathomable, original idea that we will take those 2 steps and put them together. That when you press this button, instead of adding it to your cart and then pressing another button that says, 'Now please send it to me,' with all the information I gave you that you saved last time, one button would do both of those things."
Yeah.
That's what you want to defend.
Well, the truth is that it was non-obvious in the sense that, A, nobody else had done that. And there were a lot of e-commerce sites. There were a lot. None of them had done it. And everybody was like, you can't do that. People will click it by mistake and the stuff will show up at your door and then you'll be in trouble. And then people said, people will click it and then they'll want to buy a second thing. And now you'll have 2 packages going at great cost instead of 1 package. And the unobvious part is that they figured out that, you can just combine them later by just holding the first one for half an hour.
But is that part of the patent?
I think it is, yeah. The half-hour hold, yeah. So without those...
So wait, does that mean I could do it with a 1 hour hold and it'd be okay?
I don't know if they should get a patent for it, because I actually don't believe anybody should get patents for anything. But...
All right. You just upped the ante there. That escalated quickly.
That particular one is not actually obvious.
Nobody should get patents except Amazon for one click.
Have you disclosed your stock holdings,
There's a story. Jeff Bezos called his engineers into his office and said, hey, guys, here's a system. There'll be a click. You'll be on a page that describes a product. You'll click one click, buy it, and the product will be shipped to you. And they said, what? And he said, yes, go do it. And they went and they did it. And it was one click. It went to another page where you checked off a few boxes. With a 3rd click, confirm everything. 4th click, you actually bought it. And he said, which part of 1 click didn't you understand? I said, 1 click, not 4 clicks. 4 clicks. Can't you count? And they came back with 2 clicks the second time. And he said, I said 1 click. And they said, no, you got to confirm. There has to be a confirmation in case you click by mistake. And he said, no, the confirm is negative because most of the time you didn't click by mistake. So on the second page, you can say, click by mistake, undo it here. And they said, oh.
Okay, all right. So
and
I'm
they
sorry.
finally, like the 3rd time, finally came back with 1 actual click, which to me proves that it was just not obvious. Nobody was seeing this. Nobody was getting it until
I love storytelling with Joel.
Yeah.
All right. So that
you're missing the in-person viewing of it too.
Yeah,
I know. No, don't rub it in.
Joel, when Joel was talking about destroying all patents, he actually banged the table so hard that a manifesto popped out of his desk, which appears to say something.
Sounds about right.
I can only see nothing but militia and road services shall be provided by, and the rest is blurry.
Spolsky manifesto.
A patent is, well, anyway.
So your point there, okay. So your point there is what was interesting and innovative, which now I'm starting to maybe buy into, is
non-obvious.
Effectively, no, the delay.
This is a very weird argument. So now we're simultaneously arguing that no patents should be granted, but Amazon's 1 click was probably patent worthy because it was very novel and non-obvious.
Well, at least that one was novel and non-obvious. But 99.99% of the patents that were actually granted that are software patents are extraordinarily obvious, and they're clutter in the sense that it's these little slivers of property between New York and Los Angeles that you cannot but fly over. And the solution to airlines is that the law was changed in this country to say that airplanes are allowed to fly over your property even though you own it, which is a change in the law that had to be made to allow airplanes to fly from New York to Los Angeles.
Because it was previously unnecessary to explicitly tell people that they don't get to own the sky and the space.
No,
and the
it was always completely clear that you could not fly over somebody else's property. It was always completely understood that when you buy real property, that covers from the core of the earth in a little sliver, wedge-like shaped thing to the actual property that you own all the way out to the sky, and that was well understood and is still understood. But
well, it just didn't mean anything. It was only restricting the rights of birds at the time, so it was irrelevant.
It didn't matter, but I think it was explicit.
Yeah, what about
certainly explicit?
Yeah, that's true. It does.
No, I mean you could build a tower as high as you wanted, for example.
But it's like saying we had the right to keep, germs and microbes off of our property prior to their discovery. That's true. the law would seem to imply they could not be allowed there.
I think flying machines were
unicorns
anticipated.
Okay, let's talk about copyright. Is copyright? Is copyright?
Oh my God! Already?
Well,
what's wrong?
Wow. Okay. Can we do trademark next?
Well, because
let's do copyright.
And Alexis,
it's too long.
Because you've been an outspoken advocate. I mean, not that there's not a lot of us, I think, on the other side of the SOPA fight, but for this kind of reform, you mentioned before, you're not one of these you're not like Joel, where you're trying to create like an anarchist state, right, with local militias.
I don't know. I want to hear Joel out. It sounds like his state could be a lot of fun to live in. I want to hear him out.
We'd like to subscribe to your e-zine, Joel.
Are we talking about patents? My extreme position on there should be no patents. Should I defend that now?
Sure.
You want me to?
No.
Okay.
Unless you really want to.
Yeah. No. I just don't think that that's an extreme position. I just think patents are not worth anything. Not even like the drug patents and stuff.
Well,
that's the canonical example of the one that you must keep because they'll never.
Yeah.
How
they
else
will
are
never
they going to
invent
make
drugs.
drugs to help old men get erections?
Yeah.
I mean, cure cancer because that's.
Yeah. Exactly.
But I actually don't agree. The problem you get there is you will get a massive drop off in. You'll only get meaningful R&D. You'll only get products that require a high fail rate in situations where there's an extraordinary amount of excess capital, right, in the country. So
why
basically,
can't we just allow universities and research institutes of the government, like the NIH, to discover drugs and just give them all the excess surplus value that we used to spend on patents?
Now we're really talking about stuff we don't know anything about.
Why don't we socialize medical research? Is that?
It already is, actually, because the truth is, if you look at what the for-profit people...
Don't they do most of the heavy lifting?
Yeah, the NIH and the universities do a lot of the work, and what's left, most of what the for-profit pharma companies want to do is take some drug that's about to come off patent and find some way to combine some new molecule with it by like make a tiny difference so that they can re-put it on patent and then somehow convince doctors to prescribe this new drug.
Don't get. I actually completely
but that
agree.
doesn't. Yeah. I mean, look, there's abuse of the system, of course, but it doesn't.
It's
that doesn't
all abuse.
invalidate the fact that no one is going to put in $10 billion developing a drug if the day after they release it, someone else can just take that formula and
we'll have to develop it, and we'll have to take all the extra money that you're spending on drugs right now, which is essentially consumers spending a lot of money we're getting taxed on in a certain way. If you're going to tax us anyway, just give it straight to institutions like the NIH, which can spend it doing important research instead of nail fungus research. Thank you.
Why isn't nail fungus important?
That's the number one most researched thing, I think, right now.
Really?
Maybe I just made that up. Maybe it's the number one most.
I think you just made that up.
Does it feel good to lie like that, Joel? On your own podcast?
90% of what Joel says is stuff that he just made up on the spot.
Maybe it's the number one most requested prescription.
David
drug.
is preemptively replying to the angry email. I love it.
So I think that just about covers patents and medical research. But we started to talk about copyright and didn't really go very far with that.
Well, I raised it a little bit because I think that what's fun whenever people make fairly reasonable statements, right, in protest of how bad, right, certain like the new patents, like Joel, where they roll out Nexium, and Nexium's whole job is to be different enough from Prilosec, whatever its predecessor was, that they can pull it off and then sell it under a new brand or keep. So there's all this ridiculous abuse, and I feel like when people sort of point that out or pick on the poor movie producing studios, you quickly get this, well, you guys are sort of lunatic hippie fringe who believe that all information should be free and it's a commune of products. And I mean, that's not fair, right? Alexis, obviously the book for you is a side enterprise. I wouldn't highlight you as a sort of book creator as your credibility, but you work closely with other folks, right? Like Zach's got a new book on Bread Pig now, right? Who do produce this kind of content for a living and live off of their creative efforts.
Precisely. Yeah, there are so many people who are taking full advantage of the internet as a distribution tool and are making a living as creatives, as artists, in a world where, they've had to accept the fact that, some of their content is going to get ganked. Sometimes it's going to be ganked without attribution. But they've built business models sort of in symphony, in concert with all of this, and they've been able to do really well. And I think, the only reason we've ended up in the position we're in right now, and there are folks like Lessig who've been talking about this for ages, is because the entertainment industry, because the content industry has worked so hard to distort and abuse and extend copyright that it looks a lot different from what it did when this country got started. And it was 14 years was the length of copyright in the United States when this whole thing got started.
Yeah.
And now it's I have to Google. It's like 60 years beyond the life of the creator. I mean, I can't finish the sentence. Happy birthday. I don't want to keep going with the happy birthday song. I'm not going to sing it.
Let's all sing happy birthday.
No.
Please don't. Hey, we do not have the license for that.
If we sing it, YouTube will preemptively strip anything we ever produce from their site forever.
It's completely ridiculous. Yes.
And that's madness.
And it's, the tune is stolen from something else, right? Isn't it?
Yeah. It's not even very good.
Good morning to you. No.
Hard tune to sing, and it sounds kind of lousy.
It's almost terrible
depressing.
when there's a room full of people at work singing happy birthday.
Yeah, it's always bad.
It sounds ironic.
It also starts at a nice, comfortable note, but then it goes really high in the middle, and
just awful.
It all
like
falls
happy
apart.
birthday.
Can we get a new song?
Whoa.
It's like I like your outfit. The whole thing sounds sarcastic. I'm not a fan. I really.
That's what the Creative Commons movement should do: is come up with a new open source, better happy birthday song.
That'd be great.
You know, at a minimum, copyright should not be granted to things that I don't like. That would be a much.
It's also, remember that the
that?
Constitution
Nice.
says that the copyright is in order to promote the useful arts. And I think that the promotion stops after about 10 years. After that, you're not going to get any less things created. You have all these people like the Rolling Stones or whatever, these old rockers who are 1,000 years old saying, well, I believe that I own those songs that I wrote and I should continue to receive royalties on them because they're mine. And
that's weird. I thought you were going to do Keith Richards rather than Mick. Yeah, that was interesting. It was very clear which.
I'm just talking about ancient rockers, Paul McCartney. Who are the ones that actually...
David, can you draft our response to the citizens of, let's say, England, all of Europe?
Got
all
it.
of Europe.
I'm on it.
We're already
Remember, 90% of what Joel says made up.
You might have offended Canadians.
But they already made
too.
those songs, and they would have made them anyway, even if they had only gotten, let's say, 40 years of royalties off of them, and not
copyright.
We know that because they made those songs before copyright was 70 years.
But what's interesting is that the whole concept, the word intellectual property, which is a misnomer because half the time it's not intellectual, and it's never property. Was not meant to say, this is your thing that you own. What it is, hey, we'll give you a monopoly on copying this in order to compensate you for the act of creating it. And that's a weird deal. Like, how about if we just give you some money in order to compensate you for the act of creating it?
No, that's not what copyright was. That's not what copyright is. Copyright is the government giving you a monopoly
on the right
to monetize it however you want. It's not saying we will pay you for it. It's saying
because we're socializing the music industry now.
To just be clear, Joel either wants anarchic, libertarian, free state approach where the government has nothing but guns.
I'm a socialist.
Or straight up
government pays for
Marxist communism. It's a barbell. He's not sure which.
To be clear, he wants to take back private property, so it's a little more fascism, actually.
Socialized music. I've never heard that one before.
Fascism
I've heard socialized medical research.
Did you never hear of the WPA, David Fullerton, in the 30s, in the 40s?
No.
In order to get the country out of the Depression, we gave a lot of money to artists to produce art, and they created some amazing art. The song "Happy Birthday."
I'm not sure the Depression meant what they thought the Depression meant. It was
all those those amazing
term.
Murals in the RCA building. There was actually a lot of art created as part of the WPA Artists Project.
All the national parks.
Yeah, and parks. Yeah.
I like parks.
Great stuff.
That's fine, but I feel like you're going to run into problems when all of your art is created by a government.
No, anybody can create it. They just don't get to own it. In order to promote it, however.
Thanks for making that. We'll take it.
And
Joel is now wildly popular in China.
That's all part of the long-term play.
What were we talking about? Let's move on to trademark.
This is going to be a great podcast.
No, I think we've covered.
I think we've exhausted.
Is there anything else you can socialize?
Quote-unquote intellectual, quote-unquote property.
I will say this. So I was doing some research for the book. I realized, so I went to UVA, so I have to have a deep relationship with Thomas Jefferson. And so I dug around and realized that he actually, in writing, he was actually entertaining having something in the Bill of Rights that said, quote, monopolies may be allowed to persons for their own productions in literature and their own inventions in the arts for a term not exceeding blank years. He hadn't figured out the blank, but for no longer term and no other purpose. So he actually wanted to explicitly curb something like copyright like in the Bill of Rights, while granting it, also saying, whoa, hold on, like just a reasonable amount of time.
Could you imagine?
And
essentially what they're saying is,
how did we get to where we are today?
We don't want to actually, I mean, the truth is that there were the stately royal courts of Europe would actually pay artists, right? Didn't they? Isn't that Michelangelo? Who paid Michelangelo?
No, I mean, they were
probably Catholic Church.
They were patron families.
They were paid by, and rich families, right? The Medicis.
Payton.
But you're just,
but is that really a better?
You're describing a borderline feudal society.
So Venice was a feudal society.
What about
really,
Kickstarter? Can we talk about sort of the democratization of it?
That's awesome. That's awesome. There's a lot of systems like that. Yeah. No. But the whole point of copyright and patents, for that matter, was to actually say, rather than actually just pay cash, which the government of America did not have to create art, let's encourage it by giving them little monopolies for a short period of time on the copying of the
I think we're making up history
But it's not
now.
because that. It's not
That's
because they were
in the Constitution in order to promote the creation of whatever.
But they weren't short on pocket change. It wasn't designed that way because they had like a cash flow problem.
Yeah. Oh no, they did have a
no, but I think it was out of a concern. The problem with letting the government fund things is, which we'll get into, is the people who run the government will want to debate. And so they'll say, "Oh, we're going to fund all research. That's cool, but not AIDS research, because I don't like the people that happens."
Democracy, so they probably didn't know that there was going to be debate.
Well, I just We should switch. I think you're right that the current system is fundamentally broken.
Moving on. I'm right.
We're in accord.
The system is
Wait.
broken.
What did we just agree to? Are we socializing everything
broken.
now? I don't agree with that. I'll just go on record.
The Stack Exchange is social.
David, when the socialists take over, you're going to be sorry you were so clear in your position.
I think there's a difference between social and socializing. Okay.
What else should we talk? Kickstarter. That's awesome. We can't have a podcast where we just say Kickstarter is awesome.
We can, can't we? Well, I'll tell you this. From my own personal experience, when we started doing this book, like Dead Tree book publishing thing with Bread Pig, we did XKCD's book, and that was pre-Kickstarter.
Right.
And so the way the pitch worked was XKCD will give you a majority of the profits. Great. More than 75% of the profits go to you. You control the book. It's under a Creative Commons license, like you. And we'll front the money for the initial printing run. Now, to print 10 or 15,000 books costs about $30,000, $35,000, $40,000, depending on a variety of factors, somewhere in that range. And that was a non-trivial amount of money that we could put forward that the artist didn't have to. In the last couple of years since Kickstarter, we now take our own initial down payment out of the equation because we just go on Kickstarter with the campaign goal being whatever we need for that first run of printing plus some additional stuff. And we make that in a few hours oftentimes. The most recent one we have is Zach Wiener's newest book, and he's almost raised $200,000 for this book about science.
Wow.
And it's a bunch of science-related comics and all kinds of cool tie-ins. But what it has done, and it's just the start, right, of crowdfunding, it's just one site of many that exist today and many more that will exist, is that it's proven, like, if you have an audience, you can get this creative project funded, not unlike, and I'm not comparing Zach Wiener to Michelangelo, but not unlike people found a few wealthy patrons to fund their art. Like, it is happening right now at scale thanks to the connected web.
For sure.
And it's great because it's marketing just as much as it is finance. And these artists have a total direct relationship with the people who support them. It's changed the very nature of how we produce these books, and it's been significantly better for everyone involved. So yay internet. And it's just the beginning, right? As long as no one fucks this up, we have hopefully a lot more innovation in store and like just a lot more creative people getting to make stuff that their fans want.
The reason this is all possible is because all those random houses of the world were taking a ridiculous amount of the cash. So a book was $19.95 or $29.95. The author was getting $1. And in between there was like, what do we say, $3 for printing the book and a couple dollars for distribution. But there was also just a ton of it that went to first of all, the physical good, which oftentimes nowadays doesn't exist, a lot of middle people and a lot of dumb stuff and promotion that it got spent on.
Well, it's also that publishing works on the VC model. So they were underwriting all the failures.
All the failures as well.
A couple big ones.
That's a good point. So if I'm selling a book for $24 and I only get $1 of it as the author, then if I'm going direct and selling it via, let's say, an ebook that I just put on my website, I don't have to sell as many copies in order for that to be the same deal. I can only sell 1/24th the number of copies that I would have sold in the old model. There's just kind of a lot of surplus there that.
It's an awesome thing, and we still deal in, ironically, tangible Dead Tree books. It would seem a little perverse to take a webcomic and then convert it into an e-book. Although we've had enough people asking for it, but it's exciting. And then Amazon is obviously upsetting a lot of people in traditional publishing, so much so they won't even carry their books on their shelves. But it's coming.
Yeah,
it's happening. And at the end of the day, it's going to mean we're going to get to hear from people who we otherwise wouldn't have.
Possibly, unless Amazon decides to ban your book because they
there's that.
Speaking of banning, I want to kind of see if we can get some Alexis's thoughts around moderation. Maybe the wrong way to describe it, but I think we both have experience working with sites that are very community driven, right? We take kind of a lot of pride in letting our communities decide what's on topic, what's off topic, sort of what their individual rules are. We're one of the, I think, few or maybe only major site I'm aware of on the internet where we have kind of proper democratic elections of mods. We do a lot that's community driven. However, we still do a fair amount of very big picture sort of curation, which is to say, at the end of the day, we don't allow certain kinds of topics to become sites, right? We have a very kind of democratized process for which ones we launch, but we're not really tolerant of topics we hate. This language we just think is really either a lousy fit for the network because it's just too subjective, or it's just a topic we think is unhelpful to the world, right? We generally say this won't really work here.
For example, apocalyptic defense.
Apocalyptic defense was one, which wasn't even that odious, just not that helpful.
I don't know.
I'm interested because
well, then Hurricane Sandy hit, and we wish we had it.
Who's dumber now?
Yeah, it was our mistake.
But Reddit obviously has taken, I think, essentially a very hands-off approach, right? So I think you guys are sort of, I think I read there's only 4 rules basically, and one's federally mandated, I believe. So there's really very little, and it seems like the approach at Reddit is really sort of that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let people air it out, and if it's disgusting, let people tell people that, and don't become the arbiters of sort of what's okay and what's not okay. But be interested in what you think worked well with that, but also what challenges that created or things that that makes harder.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think what your approach makes a ton of sense to what you're trying to do. You want to be an authority so that if I ever have a question about anything in my life one day, I know that there's a stack somewhere. There's some flavor for whatever it is, whether it's a problem with my car or a problem with my website or a problem with my meatloaf. And it makes sense for you guys to want to inculcate yourself against sort of the trolls and the annoying and the other stuff, or even the apocalyptic defense, which I would make a case for. But that makes sense. And Yishan, who's our CEO now, has made this very clear in that, he sees Reddit, and we all see Reddit as more of a communication platform, probably with the closer peer would be something like Twitter or maybe WordPress, in that it has generally been, and I can say statistically, 99.99% of content on all of these sites is either benign or good. But the problem is, unfortunately, when you combine jerks with the internet, jerks are willing to be jerks sometimes in front of people in meet space, but they're more inclined to do so when there's a computer separating them.
Yeah, some anonymity.
And it's one of those rules of the internet somewhere. Someone's made a comic about that at some point.
The greater internet, something.
Yes, that's the asshole theory. Is it the asshole theory?
No, I think it's the
but yes,
butt cheek theory.
And so while they do represent a very small statistical portion, they obviously get a lot of attention. And what is the hope? And I think this has generally been the spirit of things here in the States, but more broadly, I think Yishan's approach is that when we find speech that we don't like, we would rather confront it with more speech as opposed to censorship. And it's tough because sometimes you end up having to defend things that are repugnant, offensive, awful, but legal. And, it's something that I think about too from an international standpoint. Reddit hit 50 million unique visitors last month worldwide. And we still haven't quite bumped into this, but Twitter just recently has. And
you get the Nazi stuff in Germany, which is
in Germany
the law there.
Yeah. Yes, and France, right? I think it was either pro-Nazi stuff or anti-Semitism or some combination, and they've complied with national laws. And so it's going to be interesting to see as these sites continue to grow. Now, we might look at that and think, on the one hand, like, okay, this is awful offensive speech, and that's what they deem as awful and offensive, and so they have every right as a nation to say this is not what we're for. But there's going to be another nation out there that also has the internet that finds other types of speech repugnant and offensive and all those same adjectives that we would think is actually pretty reasonable.
Yeah. Like you may mention chewing gum in Singapore.
And it's interesting, a flip side of that would be how during a lot of the uprisings throughout the Muslim world after that awful video, and I say awful in part because it's such a just terrible video to watch, innocence of Muslims, YouTube said, we're not going to take this down. As offensive and repugnant and everything as it is, we believe that it deserves to still be up. And so I think in the next few years, we've started to see it, and companies, it hasn't happened for Reddit yet. It will at some point, but I don't have an answer for how it's going to end up. But, my belief really is that when I see offensive speech and offensive everything, we should absolutely, absolutely combat it with more speech as opposed to censorship.
And I think you highlight a key point that you hear people, especially on the internet, you'll quickly hear free speech conversations descend into, this isn't what the First Amendment was for. And in almost every case, the answer is, that's exactly what it was for, right? So if it's not, the First Amendment is meaningless when it's defending speech that most people think is reasonable. The point of it is to defend speech that most people think is not reasonable, because that's the only kind that needs defending. So I think you nail the point there that that's an important aspect, although I do think, like, it strikes me, it must have been sort of gut-wrenching. It's hard to stick with that. Like, during the mess around, where you have basically a tiny percent.
I'll give you a specific example, though, of where I have hope, because I am a person who would love to see less bigotry in the world, like general rule. And I hope most people are also reasonable and would like to see that as well. One specific thing that happened, and this made the rounds, there was a photo taken surreptitiously of a woman waiting in line somewhere in public. And she happened to have a significant amount of facial hair. And they took this photo, submitted it to Imager. To be very specific, we don't host any of the images, but the image was submitted to Imager, and then a link to it was submitted on Reddit and hit the front page of the R Funny subreddit, a place for funny stuff, with some kind of headline that was like, I can't tell what this is. So this really offensive headline combined with this surreptitious photo made for this comment thread where everyone was just sort of debating the gender of this poor woman. And she comes on the thread and she explains in this beautiful few paragraphs that she's Sikh and she doesn't believe in shaving. It's part of the tradition, explains the thought behind it, and said so epically, she's like, if you wanted to take a photo of me, you could have just asked me. Like, I have no problem with this. I would have loved to talk to you about it. It's a shame you went and did something so shitty, but she didn't even say that. She's better than that. She was just like, it's a shame you did something like this, but now you know. The original poster gets back on and says, I feel like a total jerk. I am so grateful that you came on and explained this to me. I feel like a complete idiot and I am an awful person. And if you can believe these Reddit comments, like a human being actually got better. Like a human being who committed a tasteless, offensive act actually learned something that day. And a few 100,000 people who saw that thread, who may have laughed at it or may have raised an eyebrow or may have just thought, oh, what a bunch of jerks, all also learned something. And when I see stuff like that happen, I realize like that can't happen at that scale anywhere else. And I'm not saying not anywhere else like other than, I mean, no, only on the internet can you bring that many people together for this thing where in theory, I would really like to believe a lot of people actually became better people. What started out as an awful situation actually turned out to be a great one. And it really can't happen anywhere else. And that is when it's at its best. Because I know we're flawed, but most of us are really trying to be better people.
I love that story. It's actually, to put this in perspective, I had to look this up. I've sent a total of 68 tweets in my whole life. I'm not even sure I'm saying that right. But one of them was actually that. I actually sent out, I think I wrote this as like a real life after school special, but in the good way. Someone changed their like jerky ways on the internet because I was struck by the story. You had the typical behavior, which is sort of childish people who want to make snarky comments, kind of picking on someone without recognizing they're real. But it got that reversal where sort of they're educated and the ringleader backs down, right? It's like a movie where it's like, oh, that's really cute. But I thought it was a phenomenal story of sort of the power of redirection in a context that you don't see a lot.
And it's like, I wish I lived in a world where that did not happen in the first place. But I know I'm not naive enough to think that I live in that world. I want to strive for that world. But in the meantime, like seeing things like that gives me so much hope because more stories like that need to continue happening. And I believe will continue to happen and need to get attention. But yeah, so it's in glimpses like that where I'm like, okay, this is worth it because someone was given the freedom to be a total jerk and they were called out for it. And they are hopefully better off for at least more than a week, who are hopefully having their whole worldview changed by this moment. And then hundreds of thousands of others who witnessed it as well.
You guys can't see Joel's face, but he looks really sad and embarrassed that he put up that original post, and he is sorry.
No.
He says he's been behaving very differently ever since. I didn't violate any Reddit rules by outing him, did I? Doxing him? I doxed Spolsky.
Awkward. But yeah, so there you have it. The internet in a nutshell.
Okay, so the internet's awesome. No more copyright.
No more software patent.
What else did we decide?
We're socializing medical research
and
art.
Well, I'm not saying completely.
Except for Kickstarter is okay. We like Kickstarter.
I just slightly socialize.
Alexis, is there anything you'd like us to socialize farther? Anything you want us to?
Maybe the making of websites.
Wow, how much power do you guys have exactly?
Well, we have the button. Remember?
No, you have the button. We merely comment on tie color.
I would love to see something that as much of a cheerleader as I am for the internets. I realize that it falls on deaf ears when I'm speaking to people who don't have an internet connection in their home. And that affects way too many, even here in the States, even here in New York. Access, I think our politicians are starting to realize how important it is. But, a quality internet connection is going to become as fundamental as like potable drinking water. And if it isn't already, obviously you don't need to live. But
that's the one that actually makes the most sense to socialize.
Oh, you're totally all in favor of giving everybody free internet access.
Well, how is it
provided by socialism, but not free art or medicine?
It's like the airwaves, though, right? Basic TV was made available to everybody.
Belongs to all of us,
right by the FCC.
As long as they agree to watch advertisements.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't think it was really.
We could talk about Juno. This is a perfect time to talk about Juno. Free email.
Technologically, we could certainly, we hear opening up the spectrum come up pretty often, but it doesn't seem to go very far. I mean, I like competition in this game. I want to see, everyone always uses that Chairman Mao quote about 1,000 flowers blooming, which always feels a little unsettling to me.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. Not a good thing. We would have smashed down 998 of them.
But I want to see 1,000 ISPs bloom.
Yeah,
but Alexis, as the mayor of the internet, can't you make this happen? I feel like you must have some influence.
We did do a thing where there's free where startups in New York got sort of fiber installed to their buildings, right? Isn't that a thing?
Google's got a whole neighborhood. They did.
Google did a whole city.
They did a whole neighborhood.
Chelsea?
Chelsea. They put Wi-Fi in Chelsea.
I think they gave Chelsea free Wi-Fi.
Pretty sure most people in Chelsea could already afford it, but
yeah,
it was nice.
I think, but in unrelated news, their headquarters is there. I believe this is maybe
interesting coincidence there. Google.
It may actually be that they somehow accidentally juiced their Wi-Fi routers, causing the Wi-Fi to spill out.
They were looking
actually
at it,
broadcasting 14 times more powerful than what was legally allowed, and so they very quickly wrote a press release saying that they were providing free Wi-Fi to the neighborhood.
It was some person in PR was walking away from the building, seeing how far they could get the Wi-Fi, and they realized it fit.
Pretty much
the whole
covered.
Neighborhood. So.
Yeah, that's so many routers in that building.
They just published the password.
This should be called the episode of False Facts because there are more.
There we go. We've got a name.
There are more untrue things,
and it's up to the listener to decide or decipher just exactly what's true and what was false.
How does that differentiate it from every other episode we've ever had?
What's true now? The whole thing is completely made up.
Also, something about socialism. Can we get that in there?
Next week will be the re-education episode where no, that's a bad name. We won't go that way.
I want to go to the re-education camp, guys.
With Steve Huffman, I hope. Who's our guest next week?
Will Grand Marshal
2 weeks from
Spolsky
now,
be there?
Robert Scoble.
Robert's
our dear leader, Joel Spolsky.
What? What am I, Grand Marshal?
No, just Grand Marshal Spolsky. Then I was like, our dear leader, Joel Spolsky. I need some good dictatorial titles.
Commissar.
I like dear leader.
That's a good one.
Joel represents. He can beat every one of us in a foot race. It's a constant thing. He's the star of a number of self-produced movies based on Bollywood hits that have already been made.
My religion prohibits me from eating glass.
Wait, what?
We're doing wrong facts now.
I mean, because that sounds like a pretty great religion.
No, my religion prohibits it.
I eat glass either.
That's actually, I think that will be a very popular religion.
You've been listening to the Stack Exchange podcast, episode number 43, with special guest Alexis Ohanian, co-founder of Reddit, current bread pig extraordinaire, and the usual David and Jay, and I'm Joel Spolsky. This episode is not brought to you by GoDaddy.
That's true. True fact. True fact.
That one's true. That one is true. And yeah.
All right. Thanks, Alexis.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
See ya.
I'm going to go eat some ground cinnamon now.
No walls and bacon and nostalgic gaming. You can't switch comics when videos playing. Look on the front page, a brand new home game. This makes me want to avoid all the things. When I can't sleep, when work's boring, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I just feel not bad.
Oh, God. It is drying
Don't try to talk.
everything in my mouth. No.
Wait, he just ate it.
Oh,
He
God.
needs to do
There's
more.
no explosion of cinnamon up
He
his
didn't
nose.
do enough.
Make him laugh so he sneezes it.
That was not nearly enough.
I mean, it's not that bad.
Oh.
Wait, someone succeeded at something.
I
That
think
is the
you did.
opposite of a good YouTube video.
Yeah, that was...
That was terrible.
And the other thing is you get 60 seconds to do this, but you did it in like 10 seconds there.
It just wasn't enough.
Maybe it was, I mean, it wasn't, I don't know.
There's a tipping point
maybe half
of
teaspoon.
quantity.
Okay, next we need to snort it.
All right, you've been listening to the Stack Exchange podcast. Did we already do that?
No, we already did that. We're good.
Remember that biscuit that we were away from Jerry Stiller? I don't think we have the biscuit anymore.